Am I in Shrewsbury or Shrewsbury?
I don't know whether I'm in Shrewsbury or Shrewsbury.
Shrewsbury, obviously.
But welcome to the video. And what I can tell you is that Shrewsbury is the birthplace of Charles Darwin and England goalkeeper Joe Hart. In today's video we're going to cycle from here, using National Cycle Route 45 down to Hartlebury near Stourport-on-Severn, passing through Ironbridge, Bridgnorth and Bewdley, roughly following the route of the original Severn Valley Railway line. And as we're using the National Cycle Network, we'll mostly be on traffic-free routes and quiet lanes. We're starting the ride just outside Shrewsbury town centre, at a place called Sutton Bridge Junction. Here is where the Severn Valley Railway peeled off from the main Shrewsbury to Hereford line and headed to the left under the bridge and out down the Severn Valley. As we head over this traffic-free bridge to the top, we can get a better view of where the Severn Valley Line went from here. From here we can see that the track split off and went under this bridge we can see on the right. And in today's ride we're going to use National Cycle Network Route 45 to follow this disused rail line, well, mostly disused, down to its end point where it joined the Leamington to Worcester line at Hartlebury, near Stourport-on-Severn. And in doing so we get to follow the beautiful Severn Valley and crisscross the River Severn on quiet lanes and cycle paths as we make our way through Shropshire and Worcestershire down to Hartlebury. We start off by riding down a quiet residential street, then we're able to cross this rather busy road using these cycle paths, to head on the other side down to a lovely straight cycle path which will take us to the very edge of Shrewsbury. Some of you may already know that Route 45 doesn't actually run through Shrewsbury, so from our starting point here we're going to have to make our way down these cycle paths and on some quiet lanes to make our way to join Route 45 at Atcham. And then from Atcham we'll be following Route 45 right to the very end point at Hartlebury. Now I could have used Route 81 to get out of Shrewsbury and join up with Route 45 at Upton Magna, but I didn't want to do that for a few reasons. Number one, we've covered Route 81 in another video, so I didn't want to go over that again. Number two, it's a bit of a longer route. And number three, I wanted to cycle on this particular cycle path, which you may have already guessed is an old railway line, and it is in fact the old Severn Valley Railway trackbed that we're cycling on here. And we get to cycle down this right to the very edge of Shrewsbury. Construction of the line between Shrewsbury and Hartlebury began in 1858, and on Friday the 31st of January 1862 the first train made its way from Hartlebury all the way to Shrewsbury, stopping at every station along the way to be cheered by crowds. As we make the journey in the opposite direction today, I don't expect to be cheered by any crowds, but I will be enjoying some of the infrastructure left behind by this railway. We do at the edge of Shrewsbury unfortunately have to leave the route of the old railway, as there's a housing estate being built in its way. But we can use this small stretch of cycle path to get to the main A458 road, which we have to use to cross the busy A5 dual carriageway. You may know that the A5 between London and Shrewsbury is an old Roman road, and that will be important for something that we look at a little bit later in this ride. But this section of the A5 that bypasses around Shrewsbury is a modern addition and was built in 1992, along with the A5 dual carriageway between Telford and Shrewsbury. After crossing the A5 we head down the A458 for just a very short distance, before turning right onto a quiet lane, and we'll be using these quiet lanes to make our way to Atcham, to join Route 45 of the National Cycle Network. At this point we do cross over the route of the old railway, although you wouldn't know it as this area has been majorly redeveloped after the building of the A5 dual carriageway. This road does narrow and turns into a lovely quiet lane as we make a few turns on our way to the village of Berrington. In between the village of Berrington and Cross Houses, we cross over a little bridge, and it's worth stopping here to take a look at what we can see. This was indeed a bridge over the Severn Valley Railway, and looking north you can see that the trackbed is extremely overgrown and not much to see there. But if we turn around and look south, we can see something rather interesting, or at least I think is interesting. Here is the first station on the line between Shrewsbury and Hartlebury, Berrington Station. The station is now a private residence brought a beautiful way of how to preserve such a historic building. You can see the track bed has been turfed over and is used as a play area. I can even see some football goals down there on what was the track. The platforms are fully intact, and there's even a little bridge crossing over. We all have our own ideas of a dream home, but I think this might be mine. Moving on from Berrington Station, we again have to make a small trip down the busy A458 road. From here we need to go right and then take a left just after the petrol station to again head onto a quiet lane which will take us to Atcham. Once we get to Atcham, we have a choice of two bridges to make our first crossing of the River Severn. First will be to use the road bridge, which follows the B4380, and the second option is to take the older traffic-free bridge over the river, which is the option that I'm going to take. This older and traffic-free bridge is known as Atcham Old Bridge and is Grade 2 listed. It was designed by John Gwynn and opened in 1776. It replaced an earlier structure here, which was probably a wooden bridge. The new bridge was built in 1929, as the old bridge was not wide enough to take the levels of traffic using the road at the time. Despite appearances, this bridge is actually built out of concrete and was designed by L.G. Mutual. The bridge originally formed part of the A5 road, which was subsequently rerouted to the north of this point, meaning that this road is now part of the B4380. The road that we're going to use for the next part of this journey, where we'll be joining National Cycle Route 45. This is a fairly busy road with a 60-mile-an-hour limit, so it is one to take care on. The road is perfectly straight for some time, just like you'd expect of a Roman road, but then takes a twist before heading up and over a bridge which crosses over the River Tern, and it's worth stopping on this bridge to take a look. From here we get a great view across the estate of Attingham Park, to Attingham Hall in the distance. This building was built in 1785 for the first Lord of Berwick, replacing an older building on the site, Tern Hall. Thomas, the 8th Lord of Berwick, bequeathed Attingham to the National Trust in 1947. So today the estate can be enjoyed by anybody with a National Trust pass, or anyone willing to pay the entrance fee. It's a lovely place for a walk and has some really fun areas for kids to enjoy. One I'd recommend. Not far from the bridge, and just as we pass this old gatehouse for Attingham Park, we take a right to stay on the B4380. Again, this is another relatively busy road with a 60-mile-an-hour limit. A couple of 100 metres up the road, Route 45 takes a right down this small lane. You can just about see a small sticker on the post on the right with the Route 45 marking. But I'm going to carry on a little bit further down here and take the next right because there's something interesting that I think is worth travelling a little further along this road to see. Taking the next right does mean a little further cycling on that 60-mile-an-hour road, but it's worth it as we get to cycle through the middle of the Wroxeter Roman city. Wroxeter was one of the largest cities in Roman Britain, and its true size can't be judged from what we can see here, as much of the city has been left unexcavated. It was founded in the mid-1st century AD as a legionary fortress, and the city was established in around 90 AD. The city began to decline in the 4th century, along with the Roman Empire, and by the mid-5th century the city had been pretty much abandoned, although a small community did stay close to the centre of the city, which is now the modern village of Wroxeter. Here we can see a modern recreation of a Roman villa, and the city is just off the route of the original A5 that ran here from the other large Roman city, Londinium. As we pass through the modern village of Wroxeter, we once again join Route 45 of the cycle network, it here joining from the road on the right. Tough choices need to be made as you leave Wroxeter, but it's worth it for some stunning riding on some beautiful lanes. The first 10 miles of this 56-mile ride has been pretty flat so far, but that's about to change. After this small bit of downhill, we begin the biggest climb of the ride, up to the village of Little Wenlock. But before we get to that climb, this little downhill had a little something to throw at me, in the form of this big pile of sand, which I hit at speed and quickly lost traction on the front wheel, sending me into a bit of a wobble. I did manage to just about recover, but at this point I think I did need some new underwear. And if you want to help me buy that new underwear, you can buy me a beer via the link in the description. and a big thanks to those that already have and those that have sent me a super thanks through YouTube. Not long after we've started this climb up to Little Wenlock, after leaving the village of Wroxeter-on-Severn, we get a great view behind us of the Shropshire Hills in the distance. We can also see the Riverside Inn in the bottom of the valley. That's the white building in the middle of the picture. The Severn Valley Line used to run through the beer garden there, where there was a small halt, and then continue along the valley here to the village of Cressidge, where the next station was. Cressidge was just over 8 miles from the start of the line at Shrewsbury, and the station there is now a private house. As we carry on along the route, we again cross over the B4380, and if you wanted to avoid the worst climb of this ride, you could take a right here, head through the village of Leighton to Bewdley and then onto Ironbridge that way, but it would require riding down this busy road. So I'm going to carry on across the road along the official route of Route 45 and make my way up to Little Wenlock. On this climb up to Little Wenlock, we get some great views of the Wrekin Hill, standing at 1,335 feet above sea level, or 407 metres. A common misconception about the Wrekin is that it is an extinct volcano, but this is not the case. Although it is comprised of very old volcanic rock, some of it up to 680 million years old, it was never actually a volcano in its own right.
Wicked lecture.
There also used to be an Iron Age hill fort on the top of this hill, but in AD 47 the Romans invaded, set it on fire and moved the inhabitants down to Wroxeter. The road surface on this part of the ride is really pretty bad in parts. It was so bad in fact that I think the only option for me moving forward is to get my hands on a gravel bike. I really can't see any other option, unfortunately. The climb gets pretty steep in parts as we close in on Little Wenlock, and there's also a few junctions and turns to negotiate on this section. They're not always signposted, so do make sure you've got the route planned into your computer or that you know where you're going. And eventually you will make it to Little Wenlock. Elevation 720 feet above sea level, as nicely pointed out by this sign. But don't worry, it's all downhill from here. Well, at least to Ironbridge, pretty much. As we make our way downhill from Little Wenlock, we cross over the busy A4169, but safely over the top on a bridge, as we continue down this rather rough road in parts, heading down to the area of Coalbrookdale. Before we get into Coalbrookdale, we get a great view of Ironbridge Power Station off to our right. This was the site of the former Bewdley train station, which was demolished to make way for this power station. Up until 2015, trains still operated into the site, coming down a track from Telford into the valley. These were used to bring in coal and biofuel for the power station, but no trains have used the track since 2015 when the power station closed. With the redevelopment of the power station site for housing and businesses, there is a chance that trains might once again run into Bewdley. As we head down into Coalbrookdale, we pass the houses of the Derby family. Abraham Derby was an important person in this part of the world. In fact, he was an important person worldwide. He figured out a way of producing iron using coke. No, not that type. But it allowed him to make iron in huge quantities, which played an important role in the Industrial Revolution, leading to the claim that Coalbrookdale, Ironbridge and the surrounding area is the birthplace of industry. As we pass through Coalbrookdale, we get a great view of the Coalbrookdale Viaduct, a 26-arch structure which was originally part of the line between Wellington, Much Wenlock and Craven Arms, and later used as part of the power station line. On the other side of this viaduct lays the furnaces of Abraham Derby. From here we make our final descent down to Ironbridge, where we need to take a left and head down the high street to the Ironbridge itself. We're now 18 miles into this 56-mile ride, and Ironbridge is a great place to stop for a coffee. There's plenty of little cafes and lots of benches to sit on. And speaking of coffee, have you seen the new Cycling Nate coffee mugs? These are available via my shop, and I'll leave a link in the description and also a link on my channel homepage. And to celebrate getting over the 1,000 subscriber mark and all the fantastic support I've had over the recent weeks, I'm going to be giving one of these away. To enter, make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment on this video using the word mug. You have 1 week from the release of this video to enter, so please do not enter after the 5th of May 2024, and the winner will be announced the following week. For now, it's time to get on with the ride. which goes directly over the famous Iron Bridge itself. Built in 1779, this was the first iron bridge in the world. It was only possible because Abraham Darby had figured out a way to make large quantities of iron economically. The bridge is now a World Heritage Site and was also the backdrop for Britain's most insensitive TV programme.
I'm in Telford, Shropshire, and I'm about to meet one of the fattest families I've met in my life.
After crossing the bridge and passing the toll booth, it's worth having a look on the road a little bit further up. Here you'll see the rails, and these are the rails of the Severn Valley Railway. From here we're able to ride on the track bed all the way to Bridgnorth. If you look to the right you can see where the track came in, heading in from Bewdley Station, and coming here to what was Ironbridge Station, given away by the fact that the pub is called the Station. The station was here in the car park but has sadly been demolished. We head through the car park and carry on along this cycle track. You'll notice I have changed bikes here, and for very obvious reasons. This bit of cycle track is not the best and does get very muddy after a lot of rain. Again, I think a gravel bike is definitely calling me. Definitely the best tool for this ride. We pass the Jackfield crossing, where there's still some rails and some replica gates in place. There was a halt just over the road, but there's not much left of it now. But these gates do look great, and it's nice to see the council have made an effort to keep them looking nice. From here there is a tiny bit of road riding, past the Jackfield Toll Museum, before again heading back onto the trackbed. This section of cycle path takes us up to almost the point of Coalport Station, which lies just under this bridge in front of us. Unfortunately, because Coalport Station is now a private house, we can't cycle under the bridge and through what is now the garden. So we have to go again on a little bit of road to make our way up to Coalport Station and carry on down Route 45. At this point as well we cross over with Route 55. From here that heads off towards Telford Centre and then Stafford. I'll leave a link to my video on that in the description. This section between Coalport and Bridgnorth I've covered on a couple of videos already, so I won't dwell on it too much. But we start at the beautiful Coalport Station, which has a lovely holiday let in a railway carriage in the garden, somewhere I'd quite fancy staying. And we'll also pass Lindley Station, again another station on the Severn Valley Line that's been converted into a private house. And just past Lindley Station we'll also get a view of Apley Hall, before carrying on down this beautiful cycle path to Bridgnorth Golf Club, which we pass through before making our way into Bridgnorth. To come into Bridgnorth we reach a small park, and it's worth making a detour off Route 45 at this point to carry on down the old trackbed, where we can get a look inside the Severn Valley Tunnel that passed under Bridgnorth High Town. Originally the plan was to cross the River Severn before Bridgnorth and then cross back over afterwards, avoiding having to burrow under the town. But it was deemed that this would be the cheaper option, so this 550-yard tunnel, and in 1858 construction began on the tunnel. The tunnel was eventually blocked off at each end in 1967, 4 years after the closure of the line. At the same time, the bridge at the south side of the tunnel, crossing over Hollybush Road, was removed due to it being too low and causing traffic problems in the town. And after passing through Bridgnorth town, we find ourselves at Bridgnorth Station, the first active station on the Severn Valley Line that we've passed so far. From here to Bewdley, the Severn Valley Heritage Railway uses the Severn Valley Line. So after Bridgnorth, Route 45 crisscrosses the Severn Valley as we make our way down to Bewdley. From Bridgnorth Station, we head past the site of the old railway bridge on Hollybush Road. We then take a left and head up Old Bewells, which will take us right to the edge of Bridgnorth. When we get to the end of Old Bewells, the little blue sign directs us left, leaving the road and heading onto a traffic-free cycle path. The path takes us up to the bridge that crosses over the Bridgnorth bypass. Shropshire Council had plans for a bypass here from as early as 1937. One of the reasons being the bridge that we passed in the centre of Bridgnorth that had been dismantled was quite low, so it restricted traffic flow through the centre of the town. The bypass was finally built in 1983, but before that in 1970, when the Severn Valley Railway was looking to reopen as a heritage line, they had to agree that the land could be sold to the council if the bypass was ever built, and that they would pay for a bridge to go over the top if they wanted to carry on running trains into Bridgnorth. After crossing the bridge we take a right turn and head down a little more traffic-free riding before we hit the road again. And I say road in a loose sense of the word, as this is more of a track, to be honest. The lanes do get better as we take some twists and turns and the occasional stretch on a bit of B road. Each turn has the obligatory blue National Cycle Network markers, and I had no problem finding my way. Coming down the B4555, we take a right turn towards the village of Upper Forge. This is clearly marked by the blue National Cycle Network signposts. We go down quite a steep descent on a road with not the best surface in the world. I was pretty glad I was on my mountain bike at this point. After passing over a small stream, the road begins to climb again, and it's quite an ascent as we make our way up towards Astbury Golf Club. We make our way through the middle of the golf course, so do beware of golf balls if you're cycling this way. The road then unfortunately goes uphill again, but there is a reward at the top with a great view of the golf club and the surrounding countryside. Astbury Golf Course was opened in 2010, and it was owned and designed by KK Downing, the lead guitarist from the band Judas Priest. From this viewpoint we also get our first view of Chelmarsh Reservoir. The next section of this ride takes us down and around this reservoir, which I'm quite looking forward to. At the end of the road we pretty much cross the B4555 and start making our way towards the reservoir. It's not far down this gravelly lane until we're directed left by this signpost, down a track which is part of the Jack Mitten Way. After a right turn and a left turn on this mostly downhill section, we emerge on the edge of Chelmarsh Reservoir. As you can see, the track here is quite narrow, but it really is quite a beautiful view. The track does turn to a lovely gravel bridleway as we make our way around the east side of Chelmarsh Reservoir. It was here I met another cyclist on a road bike contemplating whether we should take it up this track. Well, indeed he did in the end, and he made it up there fine with no problems. So although I've taken my mountain bike, this is possible on a road bike, although I would definitely recommend taking a mountain bike or a hybrid. At the summit of this uphill bit of track, we're greeted with a brilliant view of Chelmarsh Reservoir. Now, Chelmarsh Reservoir was built in 1963 and it stores water that is pumped up the valley from the River Severn, and it's stored there for use by towns in the West Midlands. Leaving this point, we head downhill on another bit of single track. Again, this was really good fun on the mountain bike. The track levels out and comes towards a ford. Now this is the outflow, as far as I can tell, from Chelmarsh Reservoir into the River Severn. I can imagine in winter or after heavy periods of rain that could be quite a deep and fast flowing ford. So just something to bear in mind. You could avoid this by taking the road from the Chelmarsh Sailing Club instead of this track, and you'll come out at the same point, which is here where this track joins the road that has come from the Chelmarsh Sailing Club and heads over towards Hampton. And there is, I'm afraid, a little bit more climbing to do here before we get to Hampton. But as always, what goes up must come down, so we are rewarded with a downhill down towards the Hampton Load Station on the Severn Valley Line. Hampton Load Station was opened in 1862 as Hampton Station. It was quickly named to Hampton Load Station after the hamlet on the east side of the river, that's the opposite side, due to that being the largest settlement at the time. It closed in 1963 with the closure of the Severn Valley Line, but reopened in 1970 with the opening of the Severn Valley Heritage Line, and it was actually the southern terminus of the Severn Valley Line before it made its way all the way to Kidderminster as it does today. As a brilliantly preserved station, it's featured in many films and TV programmes. Most famously, in 1994, The Englishman That Went Up a Hill and Came Down the Mountain, starring Hugh Grant.
I thought I had a train last night, so is there a railway station here?
From the station we head under the bridge and take a right onto a little path that goes alongside the Severn Valley Railway. It's here we come across the first of a few of these wonderfully designed gates on this section of Route 45. These gates are fantastic for keeping out people on mobility scooters, people towing children in a trailer on their bikes, bike packers with fully loaded bikes, or those less able cyclists that may be on tricycles rather than a usual bike. All the types of people I can only assume the people that put these gates in don't want on this section of cycle path. The path starts out with a tarmac surface, but quickly changes to this wooden surface. This wooden surface eventually gives way to the sort of gravelly surface that will take us the next few miles to Severn Valley Country Park. It's traffic free and relatively flat. You get some great views of the river, and if you're lucky you might get a great view of a steam train. At times you're right up against the tracks, and I was hoping for some good footage here of a train passing, but unfortunately my timing wasn't right. However, I did make a stop at Country Park Halt and got to see a steam train pass by. From Country Park Halt it's just a couple of minutes ride down this traffic free section until we get to the bridge that crosses the River Severn. The original bridge was built here in 1936. It was built in order to transport coal from the mine on the east side of the river to the Severn Valley Railway on the west of the river. It was loaded onto the trains at sidings, where Country Park Halt now is today. The mine closed in 1969, and in the early 2000s the bridge was declared unsafe. In 2006, this bridge that we see today was constructed in its place. After coming across the bridge on your left, you'll see a rather curious waymarker for Route 45, also named the Mercian Way, due to the fact that it crosses the old kingdom of Mercia. You'll see a few of these along the route, and they're designed to look like a Mercian soldier. From here, the route begins to climb again as we make our way up through the Severn Valley Country Park. As usual, the little blue markers are there to keep us on track. Although this area is now a peaceful country park, it's not always been that way. Coal mining started in the area in 1878 and continued to 1969. The mine and its spoil heaps lay derelict until 1986, when work started to create the Severn Valley Country Park. It was eventually opened in 1992. As you come to the top of the hill, you'll see the visitor centre on your left. This has a cafe, toilets and some really interesting information on the history of the area. Route 45 carries on from here with an uphill gradient, I'm afraid, following the access road to the car park. As you come towards the end of the road, it's worth taking a look to your left, where you'll see a small coal cart with the dates that the colliery here was open. We're then going to take a right and follow the blue sign and head towards Upper Arley, continuing our journey along Route 45. We do have to make a few turns as we make our way towards Upper Arley, but these are all clearly marked with the blue National Cycle Network signs, so I had no problem finding my way. The route begins to descend down towards Upper Arley, before a final steep descent down to the River Severn itself. It was at the bottom of the descent that I actually missed the turning. Now looking back at the footage, I can see the little blue sign, and maybe the cyclist coming out should have been the clue to me to make the turn in here. But carrying on, it quickly became clear to me that I had made a wrong turn, as I knew I had to cross the river here, and I could see the bridge behind me that I needed to cross. And this is that bridge, the Arley Footbridge. This was built in 1972 to replace a ferry as the running costs were becoming too high. Apparently, a ferry has been running here from as far back as 1323. The bridge is a footbridge only, so be sure to dismount before you make your way across. I'm afraid after the bridge, the route starts to climb again as we make our way up the other side of the Severn Valley. The first section bringing us to Arley Station, where we cross the Severn Valley Railway. Arley Station was opened in 1862 as a rather small station. It was enlarged and improved over the years until in 1963 the line was closed to passenger traffic and the station closed, although coal trains did pass through for a few more years. It was opened again in 1974 as the Severn Valley Heritage Railway extended from Hampton Road to Bewdley. As a brilliantly restored station, it has appeared in quite a few films and TV series over the years. Most recently, the Netflix film Enola Holmes, where it featured as Ferndale Station.
Where's your hat and your gloves?
Well, I have a hat. Just makes the head itch.
Continuing from Arley Station, the road continues to go upwards. From Bridgnorth, which was about 29 miles into this ride, until we get to Bewdley, which is about 49 miles into this ride, it's actually quite up and down. The hills aren't huge, but we are continually going up and down the Severn Valley as we crisscross the River Severn. And for that reason, you definitely need a little bit of fitness before attempting this ride. I don't think it's one you could just do straight off the back with no training, but it's definitely a ride that's worth it. There's a lot of history along the way, along with the history of the Severn Valley Line that we are following, as well as the lots of pretty villages that we pass through on these wonderfully quiet country lanes. And if you're enjoying this video, please do make the effort and subscribe to the channel. It really does keep the wheels rolling, and thank you so much to those that have already subscribed. After cycling through some very pretty villages, we do eventually make it here to the turning, which takes us onto a small piece of B road we need to go up before we make our way into the Wyre Forest. After a small stint on this B road, we come into the Wyre Forest. Look out for the National Cycle Network sign on the right and take the left turn into the car park. The Wyre Forest is somewhere I've not been before, and as this section, as shown on the Sustrans map in yellow, is all off-road, I was really looking forward to see how it was. I'm afraid as we enter the Wyre Forest, there is some more climbing to do. But what a beautiful place to be cycling uphill in. Eventually this track comes to a junction with a fire road, and the little blue sign on the tree directs us left. And from here we have a nice long stretch of downhill. The route does eventually flatten out at the bottom of a valley, where it crosses over a small stream on this wooden bridge. After a short climb, we're directed to take this sharp left onto this fairly long, straight piece of track that runs through this beautiful forest. The track continues with a gentle downhill gradient all the way to the edge of Bewdley. Further along this bit of cycleway, I notice a bridge going over the top, and it was at this point it clicked in my head. The reason that this section has such a gentle gradient and is so straight is because it's got to be an old railway line. All the telltale signs were there. It's the former Bewdley to Wroxeter railway line. This was opened in 1864. It split off from the Severn Valley Railway just north of Bewdley, made its way over the River Severn and through the Wyre Forest, west towards Wroxeter, where it joined the main Shrewsbury to Hereford line. Running through fairly rural areas, it was never going to be the busiest line in the world. Closure was proposed in 1960, and in 1962 it was closed to passenger traffic. And then in 1965 it was closed altogether, and dismantling of the track began. At the end of this section we take a right turn for one more bit of climbing before we make our descent through Bewdley to the town centre on the edge of the River Severn. In Bewdley we once again need to cross over the River Severn. We head through the town centre to the bridge that will take us over. Unfortunately today there are some road closures in place, so I wasn't able to cycle over the bridge, but it was open to pedestrian traffic in the direction that I was going. But no big deal, just needed to dismount and push the bike over. The closure continued on the other side of the bridge, and to continue following the route I had to do about 200 metres of walking at this point. No big deal, and worth it to stay on Route 45 without taking a large diversion just to be able to keep cycling. Once back on my bike, we can head towards the edge of Bewdley, making our way past the entrance of Bewdley Station. And once we get to the edge of Bewdley, we're able to carry on along a cycle path, which takes us alongside the busy A456, before crossing over and heading down a traffic-free path. This traffic-free route first takes us into Blackstone Nature Reserve and under the Severn Valley Line. But at this point the Severn Valley is once again a disused rail line. The Heritage Line does not continue this far. The Severn Valley Heritage Line that we know today runs from Bridgnorth to Kidderminster. However, the original line ran from Shrewsbury, as we know, down to Bridgnorth, and then finally onto Hartlebury. The section of track between Bewdley and Kidderminster was only added in 1878, 16 years after the original Severn Valley Railway was built. So by carrying on to Stourport and finally Hartlebury, by following Route 45, we are following the original route of the Severn Valley Railway. After passing under the old railway, we head into a lovely wooded area. The path here, although this looks like a dirt track, actually continues to be tarmac through this wooded section. It's a really nice place to ride, with a nice solid surface, but the surroundings of the lovely woodlands. And it's no surprise I met quite a few cyclists coming the other way. Unfortunately, this section of riding is only a couple of miles long. We leave the woodland and head onto a small road, which takes us to the town of Stourport-on-Severn, where the next station on the Severn Valley Line was. Unfortunately, the station in the town has now been demolished. After riding through Stourport-on-Severn on quiet residential streets, we make it to the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal. This is one that we've actually rode on before, in our journey from Birmingham to Shrewsbury. We used a small stretch which linked the Birmingham Mainline Canal to the Shropshire Union Canal. And again today we're using a small stretch of this canal, which is in total 46 miles long, and links the River Severn at Stourport to the Trent and Mersey Canal at Hayward Junction. James Brindley was the chief engineer for this canal, and construction was finished in 1772. After a short ride down this stretch of canal, we come to this bridge, which was a bridge on the Severn Valley Line, heading over the canal down towards the town of Hartlebury. And from here, Route 45 once again takes advantage of this disused section of track, as we head up on top of the bridge and carry on towards Hartlebury. To get onto the trackbed, we unfortunately have to go through one of these anti-access barriers, and there's also another one randomly placed a little further along Route 45 here. I know these barriers are put in with good intent by councils, but they really are terrible. They stop everybody but the able-bodied cyclist on a normal bicycle, making an easy journey down these routes. And what a shame, because as we head out to the outskirts of Stourport-on-Severn, this is a beautiful section of Route 45. Nice and wide, and with some lovely views from this raised embankment. And as we leave Stourport and cross over the River Stour, we really do get some very pretty views. Leaving Stourport, we head through a lovely cutting as we pass under Wilden Top Road. Unfortunately, our cycle along the trackbed of the old Severn Valley Line only lasts for just over a mile as we leave Stourport. Not far from here, it used to join onto the main Wolverhampton to Worcester line. So before it gets there, we need to leave the trackbed and carry on along some quiet lanes and make our way through the village of Hartlebury, and then under the busy A449 road and down to Hartlebury train station, which was the official end of the Severn Valley Line, and the end of today's 56-mile ride. The Severn Valley Line closed in stages and were not a result of the beaching cuts. Running through fairly rural areas, it was never massively popular with passenger traffic. The line was closed in stages, with the first closures happening in 1963, and the final closures happening in 1970, when the final train ran between Bewdley and this station here, Hartlebury. The Heritage Railway now runs between Bridgnorth, Bewdley and Kidderminster, but we're unlikely again to see trains running the full length of the Severn Valley Line. But I hope riding this route from Shrewsbury to Hartlebury, riding along as much as the track as we can, has given you some flavour of what this line used to be like. Please help me to keep the channel on track by subscribing to the channel, and to have a chance to win that Cycling Nate mug, comment mug on the video. Or if you'd like to buy a mug or buy me a beer, there's a link in the description to do that. Thank you very much for watching, and happy cycling.